Hello and welcome. We are Harmoniously, and this is Harmoniously podcast. And we have Sean with us today.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thank you so much.
So we would like to start with really a short breath, just to tune in into this podcast, and for everyone who's listening also. So let's just if you can close your eyes, and we just start to focus on our breath, to really connect with this present moment, left everything else outside, and so on. Just focus on the breath and allowing our soul to enter in this present moment. All right. It was just a short breath. For more meditation, we will provide more meditation on harmoniously as well.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
something that we love.
Just taking that moment of mindfulness is an amazing way to start this conversation. So thank you.
Exactly. And today we're going to talk about the amazing story behind Harmoniously and how everything started. And it is really a great story. So, everyone who's listening, let's just imagine we are in front of a fireplace, maybe outside. Would you like it to be like warm weather or cold weather? It could be, we can have our blankets and make some marshmallow or something like that, or like a nice weather, whatever it feels more cozy.
Perfect.
And so it's story time.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Where do we start? I feel like it's been such a crazy road to get here, and we've been through it together from the beginning. So
Exactly, I know. And that makes it so exciting. I would say maybe you can share a little bit of your background and what brought you to start your path with the plant medicines.
yeah, absolutely. So my background is really, I'm starting way back, even back as far as when I was a kid. One of the things I've always dealt with was drug resistant depression and anxiety. And so that's just been a normal part of my life and something I dealt with for, the last 40 years now or so.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Oh, wow.
just like, yeah, like so many people, I mean, that's not unusual. But I think, when I look back, I think about some of the, some of the just the challenges that brought, and being able to get to a point where I kind of felt like, I wasn't unhappy, but I wasn't happy. The fistful of drugs that I was taking every day for depression and anxiety and ADHD and high blood
Mm.
pressure and restless leg syndrome medicine, like all of those things. It was just every time I went to the doctor, I'd be put on another drug, and things
Mm.
that, like, physically things were just going out of control, and emotionally things are out of control, and mentally things are out of control. And I work in technology. I've worked in,
Mm.
doing mostly consulting and business management and
Yeah,
technology consulting for
which
the last.
which is a stress environment. For
Super
the
stressful
people
environment.
who don't know, it is a very stressful environment.
It definitely is. I think it's one of those things where you have to love it, because it's just a lot. It's always stressful. It's kind of, you have to kind of, it's just part of the job. And so I was sitting at home, it was probably midnight, and I didn't really know, like, I didn't know a lot about plant medicines, at all. And I was just kind of, all of a sudden, it was just, you hear about, medicines calling to your soul. And I was
Yeah.
just sitting there working, and I was like, I need to sit with ayahuasca. And I had no idea why. I didn't really know what ayahuasca was.
But
it's,
have you heard it before?
I've heard about it. The only time I can remember prior to that point, I remember a friend years ago, it was probably 10 years ago, asking me, like saying that she was thinking about sitting with ayahuasca. And I was just like, and I didn't know what it was, but I was just like, isn't that a drug? I was like, oh, I'm not doing it. I would never do that. Like, I'm out. Like, I don't do drugs. Yes, I take, Wellbutrin and Xanax and Vyvanse and hydrothyroxide and Requip and like probably a half a dozen other drugs every single day. But I don't. I just considered myself not using drugs because I was too old for that.
Hmm.
Um, and the irony didn't dawn on me until years later when I talked to you. I was like, I think you're the one that told me, like, in this culture, in our, like, Western society, we're really taught that drugs are medicine and medicine are drugs. All these
Mm-hmm.
beautiful plant medicines we call drugs, but they're really healing. And,
Yeah.
that's the big differentiation between drugs and medicine. And that's changed me ever since. Because I kind of keep that in mind of like, hey, there's these beautiful medicines that we can use as a tool to heal. Um, but at the time, I had no idea about that. I was just like, I kind of, I'll be honest, I kind of thought it was going to be, I tried to learn about it. I was like, I don't know why I'm thinking about this, but let me look into it. And I did some
Mm-hmm.
research and I saw some stuff where people were using like, felt stuck in their careers. And I was like, oh, this is fantastic. This is going to be like spiritual career coaching. I'm going to go and drink ayahuasca and then I'm just going to know what to do. And I'm going to make lots of money, do all these things. And it wasn't like that at all. For anybody that
Mm-hmm.
hasn't sat with this beautiful medicine, it was really transformative. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
my first experience, I remember just like kind of seeing a picture of myself, and it was in black and white, and I'm like, why is it in black and white? And I was like, wait, that's my LinkedIn profile, and there was like this amazing and profound revelation that I'm more than just my LinkedIn profile. Like that doesn't
Oh.
define who I am. And then since there, and the amazing part that I didn't expect was, um, prior to working with medicines, there's no drugs, there's no alcohol, there's no drugs.
Mm-hmm.
We don't take, we don't take antidepressants or anxiety or any kind of drugs,
Yeah.
medicine for at least a few weeks. And
Mm-hmm.
so I had stopped taking all medication. And as I stopped, before I even sat with the medicine, when I stopped taking all the medication, one, I started having a lot of the physical problems I had were getting better, which was
Oh, wow.
amazing. And so it was just getting a break from having just myself pumped full of drugs every day. Um, and then, yeah, it was just an amazing experience to be able to actually start to be able to look at different things and different behaviors and start to think about, okay, how do I take what I'm learning and like what I'm being shown and how do I incorporate that into my life? And,
Mm-hmm.
that's when, probably shortly after my first ayahuasca experience, we started working together.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and being able to think about like, okay, how do I start to bring some of these realizations about what behaviors am I seeing that I want to change? And how do I identify those, outside of the medicine and start to incorporate that? And it improved
Exactly.
everything from my relationship with my husband to my relationship with people at work, my relationship with myself and with spirit. It's been an amazing journey ever since. So
Yeah, it was a great transformation. I remember you did everything right. You immediately look for integration coach. It happened to be me. I was so honored and happy that I was able to walk you through your transformation and apply all the lessons in the medicine. And then this brought you to, well, I mean, it all started already back then, but then when more of this idea of wanting to do something more impactful in the
yeah,
world starting to grow, like there was this little seed. And then we were in Miami. So we went to
yeah,
Miami and it was amazing because it was this great conference, Wonderland, that you also went this year.
yeah,
And so you invited me to the conference, and we also decided to do a private ceremony there in Miami in this amazing, beautiful house that you rented. It was a beautiful house. We selected the outside was a nice place under two trees.
yeah,
Yeah, there was one main tree and then another one a little further away. And we set
yeah,
up everything, the altar, the mats, and we started before even the Congress started, we did this great private ceremony. And then
yeah.
that's when the bigger idea came in. So
Yeah,
tell us
absolutely. I mean,
about.
I think one of the things that was so amazing about that ceremony was starting off, taking a moment to stop and ask all of the trees and all of the plants and the spirit of the plants, like, can we have a ceremony here? Like, will you let us hold
Mm,
this sacred space? Um, and just like the power that has to recognize like the energy in all plants and in everything in the universe. Yeah, that was a really beautiful ceremony, and it was probably the first point where I think when I still remember the first time I worked with plant medicines, somebody telling me, you know, you're going to get a lot from this experience. Don't quit your job. Don't run off to don't do anything drastic. And that
Mm-hmm.
really kind of struck a chord with me because I realized afterwards, like, how, wow, all of a sudden there's this huge shift, and you're like, well, what am I going to do? And
Yes.
I really kind of looked to that guide and to the, the spirit of the plants and the spirit of Mother Ayahuasca to just guide me to be like, what, I knew I wanted to give back. I knew I wanted to do something. I wanted to be able to contribute because, we talk about plant medicines as being a relationship. Like
Mm-hmm.
whenever I talk to them, like I have a relationship with ayahuasca, I have a relationship with this medicine, I have a relationship with ketamine. Because it really is, you learn to work with it, and it's very different than traditional medicines where we're like, okay, well, take this pill every day and you'll be fine, and nobody's
Yeah.
fine. The pill doesn't fix anything, but we believe it's going to, and we just keep taking it. And that's so different here. Where with medicine, with psychedelic medicines, we're really looking to do the work. We're like, yes, we
Mm-hmm.
get these wonderful and beneficial kind of understandings and insights into our own self and our own personality and our own spirit. But unless we do the work to actually do something with that,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't help. And
Yeah.
I think that was the first time where I really were, sitting with you, being in ceremony, being able to, when you were channeling the spirit of the plants and actually talking about some of the things like,
Yeah.
how are we meant to use this medicine? What are we meant
S-
to do?
So,
So,
what were the message during the ceremony? And then, of course, we had this other beautiful moment of channeling the spirits. But what were the
yeah.
messages before that part that was at the end?
Yeah. So it's yeah, I think so. One of the things was really just was this kind of this realization of we need to be able to we need to be able to make medicines more accessible. And that's
Mm-hmm.
something that I mean is important to me. I also do a lot of volunteer work in this industry. So I volunteer at Chakrina Institute for psychedelic plant medicines, and kind of seeing the direction the industry was going, and wanted to make sure that, hey, how do we make sure that it's not, ketamine, IV infusion ketamine treatment has been around for years.
Mm-hmm.
And for anyone that has $1,500 per session for a minimum of 6 sessions, so that's, 10 something $1,000. Like, it's a great option, but not everybody can afford that, and it's not covered by insurance.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think one of the biggest things was really just seeing, like, was this knowledge of, like, y'all know it when you say, like, you just keep doing the next right thing, and like, and you're gonna, like, you'll see what that path is going to be. And I still had no idea. I remember talking when we were talking about it and saying, I don't know what I'm meant to do, but I know I'm going to know it when it gets there. And just, like,
Yeah.
basically just say yes. Do we do this? Yes. And I just followed that. And I think that was one of the places where, um, kind of taking that and thinking, like, how do I apply that? And then it was
Yeah.
shortly after that, after that ceremony, that I kind of, all of Harmoniously came into place, because I was
Exactly.
used to plant medicines, and I wound up, I think, I wound up in the hospital for over a
Yeah.
month,
Well,
and then, like,
before
yeah,
going there, let's go step by
yeah, yeah,
step. Let's
oh,
not.
definitely, yes, cool,
That's the other big step. So this first step was this beautiful ceremony. Then at the end of the ceremony, where you got the message of, like, yeah, all these questions that you have, how to make this medicine more accessible, this medicine that made a big difference in your life. Um,
yeah,
and the medicine told you just step by step, you will know it. And at the end of ceremony, it closed with the other people that were staying in the house. They came back, that they were somewhere else, and there
yeah,
was this beautiful moment of this nice gathering. And with the channeling, with the spirits coming through, like, I channeled the spirits giving this message of, like, all the people that were here. That was the starting of something important. That was
yeah,
the message. That was the starting of something important to lead the shift, the shift in the world, right? To bring
yes,
this new, um, yeah, this new world where there, with more humanity and so on. And then we went to the Wonderland, and that was a beautiful surprise, and it was beautiful to see. So the first day, I think the first day was more indigenous, the second
yeah,
pharmaceutical, the last day business, or something like that. It was divided into three
yeah,
themes, and it was beautiful to see. At least for me, it was the first time, like, start hearing also about ketamine, but at the same time connecting with some indigenous people of various backgrounds. Not only I had the experience to connect with shamans from the Amazon jungle, but there were also like over there it was from Africa and also from Native American and Mexico. And so it was beautiful to see how all these tribes, indigenous people that are still connected with plants and traditions, they all bring this beautiful message of this more connection with within human beings, within life on earth. And at the same time, so at first I was skeptical with ketamine, that is more of a chemical compound, let's say. But seeing
Yeah,
at Wonderland, seeing all the people working with ketamine, seeing that they have also this spiritual vision at the same time, and understanding that they are taking care of a whole person, it made me really change my idea on ketamine and see how is this is a first step for everyone to do a work approaching their well-being in a different way, so that where you said, like as you said, that brings the work as well. It's not like magical pill,
yeah,
but it's a great tool so that you can do your work and really get better. And so that was really beautiful to see. And then
absolutely.
all this happened, and you start grabbing more information, more questions,
Yeah.
and then something else happened later, 1 month later for you.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, Wonderland was amazing too. I think one of the things that was so important for me, at least with Wonderland. It's funny. I was talking to Patrick, who kind of runs the Wonderland conference, um, and just about how impactful that event was, because seeing all aspects of, indigenous cultures there and people there, and seeing pharmaceutical companies and VCs and nonprofits, and everybody was kind
Mm-hmm.
of looking at this through one specific lens, like, oh, okay, we're going to be ketamine, we're on the regulated access side, or plant medicine, we're going to be on the ceremonial use side, or this, indigenous cultures, we're going to focus here. And nobody was bringing all of them together, and it just seemed like such a big mess, because the spiritual, like whenever we work with expanded states of consciousness, that connection to that mystical experience, to what a lot of us consider like spirit world, is so important. And it's not a side effect. It's an important part of that experience, and
Mm-hmm.
how we can understand things in a different way. And when it comes to, like, especially with indigenous people, like having this concept of indigenous reciprocity and figuring out how do we give back, whether, I think it was amazing to learn that ketamine actually is found in nature. So even though we synthesize ketamine, it is actually a sacred plant because it does occur in nature in fungi. Um, but whether it did or not, whether we're talking about ketamine or sacred plants or MDMA or LSD or any of the compounds that also show to have this amazing healing potential, um, we all, anybody that works in this industry in any capacity, should be thinking about indigenous reciprocity.
Mm-hmm.
I know there's a conversation oftentimes of, well, if we're looking at MDMA, it doesn't come from plants, nobody's worked with that. But the knowledge that we've gained in how to work with expanded states, any type of expanded state, no matter what the compound, comes from those lessons we learned from the thousands of years of work that indigenous communities have been doing with medicines. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's one of the first things that we did before we even started the actual company, was commit to a 111 pledge, where we donate 1% of revenue, 1% of profit, and 1% of time, to give back to the community, to help support underrepresented communities like the LGBT plus or BIPOC communities, and then specifically to give back to indigenous reciprocity initiatives, so that we can help indigenous communities around the world protect the forest, protect the plants, protect their
Mm-hmm.
communities, fight for land right activism, like all of these things that are really important to make sure that we do have balance.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, to your point, yeah,
Exactly.
right after that was crazy, because that was when I was going into the hospital, because after, I don't know, a few years of, doing my own personal work of healing and trying to really make a difference, the one area I couldn't change was my weight. I still was really overweight. It was really hard for me to change that. And so I decided to have gastric sleeve surgery. And it was still the best thing I've done so far, even though I wound up in the hospital for 3 weeks on life support. Uh,
Yeah. So slow down. This is an important
yeah,
point, and
yes,
such I don't know the right adjective, but like an important experience that you went through, like
yeah. It was
traumatizing at first as well.
it
And I
was
remember I remember like we had a session. You didn't come to the session. I was like, okay, I guess he's busy. But then after
Yeah.
a while, I was start thinking, but he doesn't respond to my texts and whatever. And
Yep.
like maybe because after you did the search, you went back home. Everything was fine.
It was fine for
But
2 weeks.
then, yeah, and that's why. And then I got worried, and finally I got the news that you were in ICU.
Yup. Yeah, I wound up. Yeah, I was fine for the first 2 weeks, and then I just had really severe pain on my shoulder, and went to the emergency room and found out that I was
Mm.
bleeding internally and had sepsis, and
Oh,
then went into respiratory failure.
so it was
Um,
you felt pain in your shoulder, left shoulder.
yeah, my left shoulder, like right here,
Oh,
it was the worst pain I ever felt. Like I've never felt pain like that until I
okay.
woke up in the hospital, and then when I woke up
Oh,
and they cut me from my chest to below my belly button, and
oh
they
wow.
had my abdomen open for about 3 days while they were trying to stop the bleeding. And so
Oh
that pain
wow.
was worse. And so, but it wasn't the pain that was so traumatic. I think the pain, like for sure, we look at some of the, even just like some of the science that's coming out around this, and we know that pain does create trauma, like physical, mental, emotional
Hmm.
trauma, that stays with us. But the hardest part for me was the emotional part, was coming
Mm,
home, and I guess I don't know how some 40s or 50, less than more than 40, less than 50, and coming home from the hospital and being pretty disabled at the time. Like I had to have a walker to get around. I couldn't
mm,
walk on my own. I couldn't take a shower by myself. I needed assistance in and out of the shower.
mm,
Like I needed help with everything. I couldn't go up or downstairs.
mm.
And so I had to do physical therapy and have a home health aide nurse come to the house every couple days.
Oh
And so
wow.
it just at that time it felt like that was never going to go away. And I
Yeah,
didn't know if it would, honestly.
and even waking up, like you stay 1 week, something like that, like in
Yeah, it was
pharmaceutical coma or something. And so you woke up
yeah,
and you didn't know what day it was.
I didn't know. I went into the hospital around, I don't know, like the mid part of December. And then when I was probably like December, it was a little bit after somewhere around mid December. And when I woke up, I remember the nurse asked me, "Do I know what day it is?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's like," and I'm trying to think, I'm like, I don't know, it's like December or January. And she was like, "Yeah, it's January 2nd." And I was like, "Yeah, that's right." And I'm like, "Wait a minute. What about Christmas? What about New Year?" And then people were asking me, like I was having to go back and forth for imaging tests, and people were like, I would run into people, and they're like, "Weren't you here a few weeks ago?" And I'm like, "I don't know." And I was just unconscious. They put me in a coma because I couldn't breathe on my own, and so I had to be on a ventilator
Oh
for
wow.
about
Oh.
just under 3 weeks. And after 3 weeks, apparently, you either have to put a trach in or come off the intubation tubes. And I had two doctors. The older doctor was like, "No, we have to intubate. We have to put a trach in because he can't breathe still." And the younger doctor was like, "He's too young. We have to just pull out the tubes and hope for the best." And luckily, my husband was like, "I don't want to wake up when Sean gets up and has a trach in." And
Oh
so
wow.
they decided to pull the tubes out, and it was scary for my family. I was asleep still, but it was scary for my family for a
Of
while. But
course.
over the next couple of days, I started to be able to breathe on my own and with oxygen and everything else. I had to come home with oxygen. But now I'm fine. Now I have I'm physically okay, but the trauma from
Yeah,
that's the first time I actually considered ketamine therapy because, with
exactly.
all plant medicines, natural medicines have a much higher tendency to make us either upset our stomachs, or
Hmm.
purge like ayahuasca. And with the abdominal surgery, I couldn't risk that. And so
Hmm.
I did ketamine assisted therapy with an amazing psychotherapist.
Oh, at
Um,
home. Oh,
at
okay. You
home.
you tried
Yeah,
at
I
home.
didn't have to go into an office. I
Oh,
didn't
that's
like
very
one of the
convenient.
it is. Well, and it's convenient for a lot of reasons. Like, yes, there's the piece that for me, I'm about an hour and a half to 3 hours, depending on traffic, outside San Francisco. So for ketamine therapy, that's not offered in farm country where I live. And so I had to have to figure out how to be driven 3 hours there, 3 hours back, just to be able to get treatment. And so it wouldn't be an
Mm,
option for me. And the second piece of it is, I know just from years of working with therapists and psychologists, is when I'm in an office and I'm in a very clinical environment, it's very hard for me to let my guard
mhm.
down. And so I tend
Yes.
to just smile and say, "Everything's great. How's everything?
Yeah.
Fantastic. How's things? Great."
I think that there is also research on ayahuasca in that case in
Wow.
Brazil, and they tried ayahuasca in the clinical environment, and it didn't work. as good
Yeah,
as in ceremony space. So definitely the environment is very important.
for sure. I think environment I think that and that's one of the reasons why we do what we do and take that spiritual approach at Harmoniously, because we see over and over and over, like, medicines or drugs will reduce symptoms for a short time. And that's pretty universal. How we get healing, when we incorporate that, like the medicine with psychotherapy or coaching, it's more effective and it tends to last
Hmm.
longer. When we combine that with spirituality and life purpose and a sense of being, like, then the outcomes are even better. And so
Hmm.
when we look at this and we look at the importance of that ceremony and that connection to spirit and that connection between mind, body, and soul, like, that's where to me the most impressive things happen.
Absolutely. And so, how
So
was your ketamine therapy after
it was
your
amazing.
experience? I
I
see you.
was Yeah, I'll tell you, like, the good and the bad.
Yeah.
I have my own biases, just like everybody. And when I first, because like I said, prior to working with natural plant medicines, um, I was very opposed to drugs. Like, it wasn't something and when I first tried ketamine therapy at lower doses, it makes you feel you don't have as much of the mystical experience, and it just made me feel like altered, like kind of like I was on drugs, and I didn't love that feeling. But I did notice that it did help with some just my anxiety and most of the
Hmm.
anxiety and depression, like, pretty
Okay.
immediately. With the next day, I noticed the difference, even at a really
Mm.
low dose. Um, the amazing part is, I assume, my family, everybody, we all, myself included, assumed that it was going to be like a year or two of therapy just to deal with the trauma of, like, everything that I just
Yeah.
went through. And when I combined it, this is for me, everybody's different. But for me, when I combine ketamine therapy with psychotherapy, specifically dealing with trauma and being able to work through things like, using techniques like EMDR, and being able to go back to the first time I was in the hospital, and remembered that, hey, I'm going to survive. I'm going to be okay. And I'm going to get home at some
Hmm.
point, and I'm going to get better, and I'm going to walk again. And being able to start to kind of retrain my brain to kind of accept those traumatic experiences and then reinforce the positive ones. It was only 5 weeks or 6 weeks that I
Hmm.
did ketamine assisted psychotherapy, and I was completely dealt with all of that trauma,
Which is
which is
amazing. Yeah.
incredible to think that that's possible.
Yeah.
Like,
It is
I thought I'd
incredible.
still be not able to talk about this. It took me,
Yeah. Not only is it incredible, and it was very quick, like five,
yeah,
6 week. And as you said, maybe some people would take longer, but still like much quicker than like regular therapy alone. It's also, I think, and this is my opinion, that when you have this kind of trauma and you need to work on these traumas for many years, somehow they get in you more, what I
yes,
mean. So that it becomes, the more they stay in you, the harder it gets to be able to overcome them and be able to immediately address those issues with the help of ketamine and a ketamine assisted therapy, and immediately have those trauma like become an experience. And on top of that, then you build something more on top of that. But I
yeah,
think it's so valuable that you were able to work through those traumas so quickly, and they didn't have to stay in you for so long.
yes. Well, and that's the other piece of it, I think, is,
Yeah.
when we talk about trauma, and we know that this is incredibly effective for trauma, but there's like the big traumas, like, winding up in the hospital and on life support, like, that's a pretty big trauma. People go through all kinds of trauma throughout their lives, but then there's the little
Yes.
traumas. There's the everyday stress.
Hmm.
There's all of the things where, our brains are incredibly effective at protecting us or trying to protect us. And
Yeah.
so when we run into these little traumas, these everyday stressors, they have a physical effect on us. For
Hmm.
everything from how our DNA expresses itself to how we're able to, just deal with everyday challenges in life. And so we tend to build up for habits and old ways of thinking that
Hmm.
protect us from running into those situations again. But they're not always effective. They're not always what we need. So, like, while that may have been protection at one point, at this point now it's like me just overacting at work because somebody disagreed with me, and now I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
no, why are you doing this? You have to do this. You have to. I'm
Mm-hmm.
becoming like overly controlling, and having that ability to be able to step back and say, hey, wait a minute, I recognize this behavior. I know that it was valuable at some point, but I don't need to act on this anymore because it's not giving me the results that I want in my life. And I can start to teach myself new ways of thinking and new thought patterns and new behaviors. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just that work, you can't, there's no pill, there's no medicine, there's no plant that's going to do that for you. Like all medicines are just tools to be able to help us get insight into where do those thoughts come from, where do those behaviors come from. But then it's about doing the work with a coach, with a therapist, with somebody
Mm-hmm.
to actually
Mm-hmm.
start to think about, okay, now how do I put this into practice in my life?
Absolutely. And then, anyway, so this other piece. So we were going back to the story. So you were starting starting with many years of using drugs, medicine.
Yeah.
I mean, Xanax, all that for depression, anxiety, and then like finally one day you have this ayahuasca came in your life. Like even if you heard before, it's just one day this desire popped in, and then your encounter with plant medicine, and then Wonderland, and so on. And then we arrived to this traumatizing experience that you had in ICU with bleeding, internal bleeding, and they still took you to try ketamine, even though we did hear about ketamine at the Wonderland Congress.
Yeah.
And I think it was the first opening about how ketamine can be helpful, but you then experienced firsthand and how it can be very helpful, especially in some situation where you cannot use any other kind of plant medicine or any other tools.
Yeah.
And this tool comes in to help with therapy and help you to overcome the trauma from your previous experience. And then there was the missing piece to, as the plans told you, just go step by step in what it is that you want to create. And that was the missing piece of like, oh, maybe tell us more after that, because after
Yeah.
that, the only thing I know, then a couple of months later, when we were all fine, you contacted me and you were starting this harmoniously. So
Yep. Yeah. So yeah,
how
I
did it
think
actually go then?
yeah, it's I mean, thinking back about it, it still seems unbelievable to me. We
Mhm.
kind of started talking about like, hey, what if we were to bring all of these things together? Like, so I don't like I was lucky. I worked with, even doing at home ketamine therapy. I worked with one of the other companies that I really really respect, which is Interwell. I think they also do a really great job. Their focus is very much on the psychiatric approach model to
Mhm.
mental health, where we're very similar, I think, in that regard, where we bring in the psychological and the psychiatric model and regulated medical access, but really incorporate that. The focus is incorporating that on spirituality and psychology. Like, so really
Mhm.
this full holistic approach to, um, how do we think about treating a person. And I think, like, Rachel, who I know you talked to Rachel recently also, like Rachel, one of our co-founders and one of the most brilliant medical people I know, um, was started to just kind of thinking about, how do we start to look at prescribing not just the medicine, but how do we start to put things like my care plan has go outside and get sunshine 30 minutes a day,
Mhm.
be walking and natural
Oh
movement,
yeah.
exercise, nutrition, and I get hydration. So like my Apple Watch. So I have like my Apple Watch, which connects to our EMR, so our electronic medical record system. So if I talk to Rachel and I'm like, oh, my anxiety is getting really bad, before going to like, oh, I can prescribe you ketamine treatment for that. She's like, well, I see you walked 300 steps last week. Like, get out from behind your computer and then come back and see how you're feeling. And so it's things like that were, yes, medicine helps, but it doesn't help by itself. And so we really try to incorporate all of these things that we just saw missing in the industry. And
Mhm.
so that's when I reached out to you because, having the background in working with sacred plants and plant dietas and spirituality, and bringing that lens in to how do we
Yeah.
think about how do we do the right next thing with this company and to really make a difference in the world, because like
Yeah.
our number one goal is to help people, but we help people by elevating consciousness. Like we really
Mm-hmm.
want to see the whole world be helped. And this is like one small step towards really making that change.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, and that's the beautiful vision behind Harmoniously. So
it,
really approach well-being
yeah,
in a way that that integrates all these tools and especially focus on the person.
yeah, because it's all you have. Like we have everything in us we need to heal. Like we have amazing abilities. And when we look at that and when we look at how do we practice self-care? How do we make sure that we're, I always describe it like my own experience of dealing with mental illness my whole life and playing whack-a-mole, where I'm like, okay, well, I'm depressed. Well, boom, take this medicine. And they're like, okay, but now that medicine's causing anxiety. Well, here, take anxiety medicine. Well, now I'm not concentrating. Well, here, take a stimulant. Well, now I'm having problems with high blood pressure. Okay, take like it was just like every time they tried to fix something, something else got
Mm-hmm.
worse. And so at least for me, and again, everybody's different, but for me, it gave me this ability to be able to step back and be like, okay, I have tools. I still work with ketamine occasionally. Like when I start to feel symptoms of depression or anxiety coming back, I still, I'll do another couple sessions of ketamine assisted therapy, or like right now I tend to do more working with a coach. I thought
Mm-hmm.
for me, I found working with a therapist was incredibly beneficial for trauma. We also have a lot of therapists that can do coaching, but for me, most of the time, I'm focusing more on day to day stuff, day to day,
Yeah.
how am I behaving? How am I showing up? Or, looking at behaviors that I want to change in myself to improve personally and professionally. And that helps me reduce a lot of the anxiety and depression. And so all of these things fit together. And if I'm sleeping, so I can tell you from like, the first thing that I look at when I'm starting to feel like mental wellness challenges is how many hours am I sleeping? Because again, I track it on my watch, and when I start seeing that's 5 or 6 hours, I know like, okay, well, that's why I'm feeling this way, because I
Uh-huh.
I need to have 7 hours of sleep. If I
Yeah.
sleep a lot more or a lot less, it's not good for me.
Mm.
And
That's
just
good.
being able to work through and having a medical professional, having a team of people that I can work through. So I can call you and be like, I
Mm-hmm.
need coaching. Can we work together? And I'm starting
Mm-hmm.
ketamine therapy again. And in addition, I'm working with a trainer and getting out and getting exercise. And I'm looking at my nutrition, like bringing in a nutritionist to be able to say, like, what should I be eating? Like, how do I focus on eating the right types of foods?
Mm-hmm.
How do I focus on gut health? We know
Mm-hmm.
that gut health has such a huge impact on mental health. And as our
Yes.
gut biome is out of whack, we start to see psychiatric symptoms start to arise. And
Mm-hmm.
so those are the things that are just overlooked in the traditional corporate medicine model. And that's really where we hope to be able to help people is say, we can look at everything. It's not just like, oh, okay, however many millions or billions of people have depression and that many people should just take an antidepressant. Because that alone is not, it's just not, as we learn more about ourselves and about the mind, about neuroscience and about psychiatry and psychology and like spirituality, and we see how these things are fitting together in a way that we never, indigenous cultures have taught us like, oh no, the spirit to connection to the spirit, our connection to spirit world has a physical connection and can have an impact
Mm-hmm.
on us physically. And that was always considered to be superstitious or religious or spirit like, and it wasn't, there's no scientific fact behind it. And so for years, the brightest minds would say that that wasn't real. It was all in our minds. And now, as we start to learn things like, how things operate at a quantum level and all of these things, when how are, seeing studies where we're actually able to show these spiritual principles in effect, there's this amazing study where a piece of muscle from a subject was given to a person who was just holding it in their hand. It was in a tube, but I mean, holding onto it. It wasn't there. It wasn't attached to them. And they were shown images of stressful situations. And when they were shown
Mm-hmm.
the stressful situations, afterwards, they would study the piece of tissue and look at the DNA strands. And when the person was exposed to stressful issues, even though it wasn't part of their physical body, the DNA would start to knot up. So that
Mm-hmm.
energy from that image to the person processing that, and then that energy being making a physical impact on a piece of tissue that was not related to them is amazing to think that that's possible. But you could say, okay, well, yeah, but they're holding it, and maybe it's just electrical impulses. They repeated the same, and the government, the U.S. military, repeated this. they repeated it. I think it was up to like 30 something miles away, where another person not shown stressful images was holding another sample, and both samples were tested. When the person that was shown stressful images and they saw the DNA knot up on itself, the other sample also knotted up on itself at the same
Mm,
time. And even though they were completely unrelated, they were separated by miles. The person was not seeing that. So somehow there's, whether we call that spirit, whether we call that quantum entanglement, whatever that is, we're starting to see now that, you know what, we don't know as much as we thought we did know.
yeah.
um,
There's
and
so
that's a pretty
much
humbling
more.
experience. There's so much
Yeah.
more.
There's so
Absolutely.
much more to well-being. And that's why like we are creating a platform in Harmoniously where and we are starting with ketamine treatments, but also like offering and seeing the person as a person first of all, not as a patient or any
Yeah.
client. It's a client, but like it's a person first and first
Yeah.
foremost, as a person, and a person that is a piece of life, if you want to call it that way, but it's life in the sense that also is in inside a bigger structure system that is this person life. And so like approaching and see, as you said, like if maybe I'm more stressed or getting more sad, maybe it's because I check and I'm sleeping less. So
Yeah.
approaching the person and see everything that is going on instead of just like healing or curing a symptoms or numbing a symptoms, but seeing everything that's going on. And
Yeah.
we're doing that by gathering a lot of great experts and a great team
Yes.
to be able
Yeah.
to, as you said, like, okay, maybe right now I need more coaching. And then later on, a couple of months later or 2 weeks later, maybe I need more to focus on nutrition, or now I feel I want to focus more on meditation, and so on, and be able to offer all of that according to what the person feels they need or what is that they are lacking in their life or want to learn or do more.
Yeah, and I think so important there is that ability to meet people where they are. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's, speaking from, again, from my own personal experience, when you're dealing with like really severe depression or anxiety or PTSD, it's really hard to be able to say, okay, well, I'm going to focus on spirituality or nutrition. And we know that. And
Yes.
so having this path where people can say, you know what, I just need medication, again, coming from someone that like deals with drug resistant depression. Um, there's only so far like traditional medicine wasn't working. Like I've tried it. I've done TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation, where I would have to do 36 sessions twice a year. And I would have to drive hours a day to try to get like half of my day would be spent just going on most of the year for
Mm-hmm.
TMS. Um, and so to be able to say, we have the option for people to say, like, I just want to try the medication. Like, let me see if ketamine treatment helps me. And as we start to see it, like, and the one of the benefits, while we're still waiting for, well, hopefully we'll see the FDA to approve ketamine for an on-label use for depression and anxiety next year. There's a lot of work and a lot of science going into that.
Mm-hmm.
We do have a number of studies, while they're not accepted yet and it's still not approved by the FDA. There's a huge body of evidence that's starting to build to show how effective not just ketamine treatment is. We already know that from with IV infusion, but we're seeing the same results in studies then from at-home ketamine, which is sublingual, just a tab under your
Mm.
tongue. And
Yeah.
so it's as we get to move past that and get that more rapid relief, we start to be open to, okay, well, what if I combine therapy with this? Is this going to help?
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm
Mm-hmm.
open to expanding. And what if I incorporate spirituality or a meditation practice or yoga
Mm-hmm.
or breath work or, all these other modalities
Exactly.
that help us?
Yeah, as you said, you need to start where you're at, and then from there, getting
Yeah.
better first, and then from there, you're able to expand more in 360-degree well-being in your life. But definitely when you need to start where you are. And the beauty with ketamine, in when we did the podcast with Rachel, she was also explaining how if for people that are using medicine for anxiety, depression, and so on, they can do ketamine treatment, which if you actually want to try some other plant medicine, you cannot. You have to to
Yeah.
get off those, and that can be a big impediment. So it's good that you can start your journey with ketamine that way as well, and getting better. But
Yeah.
if for anyone more interested in that discussion, you can watch the podcast we did with Rachel. She
Yes.
explained more in detail. She's our medical person for those
Yes.
details.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know. That's yeah, it's so true. And it's it's so great to see where we are right now with so much changing and just so much research going into, not just ketamine, but all psychedelic medicines. And I really hope that we continue to see the progress that we're making where we're accepting what's important from what ceremonial use as well as medical and regulated access use, and the two are so important. Like that's the one thing I
Hmm.
still worry about is, while we make all this great stride on the medical access side, and I think we should, we also need to remember that there's a lot of that healing potential does come from that spiritual connection, and
Hmm.
we don't want to take that away. So
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I'd like to remind the last thing you told about it a little bit at the beginning of the podcast, but also, like, not only harmoniously, we want to approach the well being of the whole person, but also, the structure of the company is in a way that want to honor um, the indigenous people and just in the
yeah.
indigenous tribe, and also any other kind of volunteer work, or as well like making this kind of practice more accessible to anyone, which is also one of the vision behind Harmoniously.
Yeah, it is. So that's actually part of so we incorporated as a PBC, as a public benefit corporation, because we really do we want to be able to make sure that we're making an impact in the world and in people's lives. And so we do everything from, we have a really strong focus particularly on Indigenous reciprocity. I think that's so important. Again, like we have, we donate we're going to work with Chacruna Institute, to be able to donate 1% of profit to their ERI, their Indigenous Reciprocity Initiative, where they make grants directly to Indigenous communities so that they can use those funds however they need to. I think, especially, so I think in Western culture, but especially in the United States, we have a lot of people with really great hearts that think they know how to fix everything for everyone. And we don't. Reciprocity is not about saying, hey, you need this. You should be doing things this way because this is how we do it in America.
Hmm.
Because if we knew how to do things right in America, we wouldn't be flying to other countries to go sit with Indigenous people to learn how to be more well. And so really respecting that and understanding that our way might not be the right way. And we need to ask, like, what do you need? How can I
Hmm.
help? Like, what's important to you? Instead of just making assumptions. And the reality is, like, I'll be 100% honest and say, like, I don't know that. Like, I can't answer those questions.
Hmm.
I'm not an Indigenous person. I don't live in those communities. I don't know what they need. And we approach the same way with all communities. We do a lot,
Hmm.
I'm part of the LGBT community. But there's a lot of blind spots that I have even there. I'm a cisgender white male. And so even being part of the LGBT plus community, there's a lot of things that I just don't run into. There's a lot of things that I haven't experienced, and I
Yeah.
recognize that, and I want to make sure that we don't let those blind spots
Yeah.
interfere with the work that we're doing.
And the
And
same
that
with veterans, another group
yeah,
that
and
we
veterans.
want to support and help.
Absolutely, yeah. We have Dustin Hamilton, who's a Marine Corps veteran, helping us do outreach, and we have a number of patients that come from the veterans community, and
Hmm.
there's such a need to be able to help that
Yes.
community who's dealt with so much trauma and dealt with so much stress, and
Hmm.
how can we give back there? And so we
Yeah.
do. So we really try to focus on, I would say, just stopping and asking, like, what do you need? How
Hmm.
can I help?
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah, and hopefully, and also, like, by growing, we will probably approach other communities that we can approach in the same way. But that's the vision behind it, like supporting this community, this reciprocity, and asking them what they need, and supporting that in an act of service.
Absolutely.
And yeah, that's beautiful. I think we're arriving to the end of this podcast,
Yes. Yeah. Thank you
right?
so much. It was such a beautiful conversation. And I'm so
Any
glad to hear it
last
with you.
words you would like to share?
No, yeah, I think that's it. Just thank you so much. It was so great to be here. It's so great to be able to kind of talk a little bit about harmoniously.
Hmm. Yeah, thank you everyone for watching or listening.